It's that time of the week again. It's jump show time. Yeah, can't wait for Wetherby and ASCOT this Saturday. Charlie Hall has come round once again. We've got last year's winner, Brave Man's Game, lining up, looking for a repeat victory in the race. Jake Price, Dan Overall and myself going to war once again to try and find some winners. It's pretty good racing this weekend, to be fair. I'm a little bit worried about the weather. I don't know what you can tell me about that, Dan, but I mean, obviously with a storm, Kieran, I think it's called around, it's a lot of rain, a lot of wind, but as far as I'm aware at the moment, we should be okay.
Well, yeah, Ascot's going to be heavy. There's pretty much no doubt about that. They don't seem to be overly concerned about it going ahead, which is positive. Wetherby's the dicey one, I guess, of the two, because their drains are full and the river that it drains into is also full. So any more rain that comes could prove a bit of an issue. And I think there are parts of the track, as we're recording, that are somewhat flooded, but they're not the raceable parts. So probably okay, but depending on how much rain they get tonight, and there's about 10 mil due, could be a close one. I think they're inspecting Friday morning as well.
Oh, yeah, we'll keep an eye on that for sure. And yeah, fingers crossed the weather gods are in our favour. Let's have a look back, shall we? Let's start by looking back last week. An interesting week of action. I've picked out one horse who's a notable performer of mine. But Jake, let's start with you, with yours from the week gone by, and I think that really caught your eye.
Yeah, well, mine came from Chepstow on Tuesday, and I really like Chepstow meetings this time of year because you get good maiden hurdles, you get good bumper winners, and you get good novice handicap chases. Now, this is actually just an ordinary handicap chase, and the performance that really took my eye was the King of Ryhope. Now, the thing that I really liked about him is he's up against some more experienced horses in Can You Cool and Noctua Galactus, so it was a decent enough race. But this is not me pocket talking at all, because I didn't have a single penny on, because connections were saying about how he really benefit from the run. He needed the run quite badly by the sounds of it. And also the fact that the stable down Skelton Yard have really not been in that great of form lately. Even today at Stratford, they've had a couple of horses hit the front and just not get home. And it was the same on Chepstow. He had about 3 fancied runners and none of them really got home. And it was quite a disappointing day for them. It's a bit of a quiet period for them, which you wouldn't expect this time of year. So I think it was a massive performance from the King of Ryhope, because he was riding along after jumping the 4th last, and at that point, considering what the other horses had done, you kind of thought his chance may have gone. But he absolutely winged the 3rd last to take him up into contention, to put in a massive jump at the last and beat Can You Cool by 3/4 of a length, which I just think was a massive performance. It came over 2.5 miles. I think his optimum is going to be over 3. He's definitely going to come on for the performance. It came off a mark of 129, so I'd imagine he'll get a good 6 or 7 pounds for that. But I really think that he's a horse going places, and when he steps up to 3 miles, he's going to be winning even more races.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely bang on about that, Jake, as well, because the fact that he's managed to win, given that most of Skelton's aren't finishing their races off, suggests that he's probably going to be fairly well ahead of his mark. So, yeah, I totally agree with you on that, for sure. Dan, I know that we usually pick one recent notable performance, but you've got a plethora to look back on.
Yeah, I had 4 actually, but Jipko, I was going to mention, is running Ascot, and I think that's too soon, so I've scratched him off the list. I'll briefly go over these ones. So Jaguar is the first one, obviously ran behind in the waterside. It just looked a really nice individual, I thought. Kind of reminded me of Iroko. The noseband, the colours, the connections, and obviously my soft spot for that horse lives on. He'll be a nice novice hurdler to follow, I think. Maybe handicaps towards the end of the season be the plan for him. Ginny's Destiny, I thought shaped better than the bare result on his chasing debut for Paul Nicholls. Went pretty well, jumped well, just tired late on ground. I think he would have found quicker than ideal. I think there's races to be won with him over fences. And then Usse Partia over in Ireland for Martin Brazel ran in a 3-year-old hurdle behind a Gordon Elliott Gigginstown horse who'd had experience. I think the term lightly handled would about sum that up. I mean, go back and watch that race. He may have been asked maybe once for a bit of an effort, and that was about it. Like, that horse has got more ability than that race would suggest, and given
very
connections
very diplomatic, yeah.
Yeah, well, you got to be, ain't you? You never know who's watching. But I think given connections, kind of nature, especially in terms of targeting Cheltenham handicaps recently, it wouldn't be a surprise if that horse ends up rocking up in something like a Fred Winter. But a juvenile to track, I think, in the months ahead.
Okay, nice. You're not going to like my horse to follow, Dan, I'm afraid. It is Release the Beast. Because it's trained by Paul Nolan, and we all know, well, we're all very good friends with the man who sings Paul Nolan's praises perhaps when they shouldn't necessarily be sung. But at the moment, I think Release the Beast deserves plenty of praise because he produced a really taking debut last week at Galway. He won off even money favourites, and the yard have made no disguise of the regard in which they hold this horse. And to be fair, he couldn't really have done it much more impressively. I don't think it was the strongest race in the world, but he pretty much won on the bridle. And considering that's likely to be a minimum trip for him going forward, I would say he's definitely one to keep on side. And of the horses over the last week, he's probably the one that impressed me the most. And that is even without the influence of Andrew Blair White on me, because I did watch the race myself and I came to my own conclusions. So Release the Beast, I think, would be my one to take out of last week. Good stuff, guys. That was last week, but this week we've got loads, haven't we, to look forward to? And yeah, as we say, provided the rain stays away. Let's go to Wetherby then, shall we, Jake? And kick off by looking at the 150 listed Mares Hurdle. This is a bit of a belter, I think, one of the races of the weekend.
Yeah, it's a good race. The three at the top of the market is who I'd expect to be contesting the finish. As we mentioned with the Dan Skelton horses, potentially Katira might be the one that ends up dropping out in that finish. And I see it as a bit of a match between Lucia and You Wear It Well. Now, I don't mean there's much between them. Obviously, we saw in the run in the Mares Novice that You Wear It Well managed to dictate from the front. She loved the soft ground. I've always seen her as a 2.5 miler, though. I think she's at her best at that trip. I think she really did get to dictate at Cheltenham. And I think we're going to see a much better Lucia this year. I think she would have been an absolute certainty. Like if you'd asked me a couple of weeks ago where she'd end up running, then I think it'd be a certainty that the Jerry Fielding was where she starts. I think the fact that she starts here is a positive. She must be quite forward for them to be able to run her already. James Bowen's on board, which I don't mind at all. And yeah, I just think she's going to be the horse who progresses further this year. I think she's more of the 2-miler. I think the soft ground will be okay. It's not going to be winter soft like it was at the Cheltenham Festival. It's still in the early autumn. And yeah, I think she's got a great chance. She obviously went up to Aintree and finished third behind In the Pocket as well, which is a piece of form that I'll hold close to my heart. So yeah, I'd probably be with Lucia, but it wouldn't be a race where I have a massive opinion.
Yeah, you're really not feeling the Skeltons at the moment, are you, Jake? I mean, the moment 9-4 joint favourite is Katira, but easily bypassed by yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I love the Skelton Yard, but it's just their current form. You have to be careful with it because there's clearly a common theme where they're travelling well and just not getting home. Yeah,
absolutely right. And yeah, Dan, moving on to you. I mean, apart from the fact that You Wear It Well was clearly named after your sartorial elegance, do you think she's going to be the one to beat in that Mares Hurdle?
No, I'd agree with Jake that Lucia, I think, is the one to beat. I think the market is now starting to correct itself. So Lucia had been as big as 7-2 in the build-up to the race, maybe with a bit of uncertainty as to whether she'd lined up. But even as of earlier today, there was 11-4 kicking around. She's now generally 2-1 favourite, 6-4 in some places. That may be a bit on the skinny side because, again, you are taking a bit into consideration here in terms of how forward these are. I'd expect You Wear It Well to be generally quite forward anyway. Just based on it, I think this is quite a big test for her. I don't imagine they're going to leave her too far short. Katira, I think there's questions, again, in terms, as Jake mentioned, in terms of the yard. Lucia, I think there's going to be some doubt as to how ready she is, but I think Nikki's yard in general are a bit more forward than they have been in previous seasons, mainly because I think we've had more rain in October than previous years. So generally, they've been quite slow starters in the past couple of seasons, but it doesn't seem to be the case this time around. I think
just on that, Dan, Nico did say, didn't he, after an interview when he won last week, I think it was, they managed to get out on the grass a lot earlier than usual this year, and I think that's definitely been borne out.
Yeah, definitely. You can tell, I think that's a big part of why Lucia is ready to go now as well. And I think you'll see a few of the others maybe you wouldn't have expected to see until maybe late November, starting to reappear a bit earlier. So I think that's a big part of her case. Obviously, the ground, I think some will question it because in recent times over hurdles, she's been performing on quite good ground, especially when she was like the likes of Exeter. It was pretty quick, but she won at a Sandown bumper in facile fashion a couple of seasons ago, and we know what Sandown soft can be like. So I wouldn't really have too many worries about that. She's the more natural 2-miler of the three. You Wear It Well will have Stainsby Girl pressuring her on the front end, you'd imagine, so I don't know if she'll get it all her own way. It's a really interesting race. I can see cases being made for all three. If Lucia hangs around the 2-1 mark, but the market is starting to make her a bit shorter, I think she's a bet, but it's going to be one of those where I think the market is already speaking quite loudly in Lucia's favour, and might make the likes of You Wear It Well and Katira a more backable price.
Yeah, I mean, I think it completely depends, doesn't it, on who's ready to go and who's not, and who's more ready, who's not more ready. For me, You Wear It Well, the last time she met Lucia in soft ground, it was a resounding success, of course, at the Cheltenham Festival. So I'd be keen to keep with You Wear It Well. And, there's no disguise in which the regard Jamie Snowden holds this mare. And, I love the fact that he's kept her hurdling this year, because there was a lot of talk about going chasing, but they decided to keep it over the small obstacles for You Wear It Well. And hopefully that can be rewarded. That's the 150 then. That's a really good mare's hurdle, actually. Look forward to that, I have to say. Look forward to 225 as well. This is the Bet365 hurdle. I wouldn't say this is necessarily as good a renewal as been the case in the past, but it's intriguing enough, and there's no horse you can kind of say, oh, that's definitely going to win. I'll put my 2 cents worth first, because I'm probably the person people want to hear least. And that would be Botox Has. I'm actually quite a fan of. He wouldn't be the best in at the weights here, but I'm mainly looking at him for the fact that his reappearance record is generally pretty good. He won on his first run for Gary Moore. That came at Fontwell back in October 2019, actually bolted off by 18 lengths. Then he won the next year after a 315-day break, beating the Pinkin at Cheltenham by 4 lengths. And then after another break, he went to the Coral Cup, understandably a little bit, struggled a little bit there, but that's because it's such a good race, I think. And then he went to Plumpton next time after a 215-day break, chase debut, and fell, but he was going fine at the time. And following another break, he then won the National Spirit of Fontwell, and another break, finished a 2-length second at Cheltenham at the beginning of last season, a 3-mile handicap hurdle. So essentially, his fresh record is really, really strong. And I think we're yet to see the best of him as a hurdle, to be honest. He's a 7-year-old. He's at the peak of his career now, and hopefully he can go on. I don't think this is the strongest race in the world by any means. And for me, the one to fear most is Time Hill, particularly at the weights. He's nicely off at the weights, and we all know how classy he is. But if there's a time, I think, to catch him, possibly it is on his return, whereas Botox Has, if there's a time you want him to win a race like this, it will be now. And there's no doubt he'll be absolutely bang on for this run. So he'd be my pick in this. Dan, what do you make of those comments?
This race is tricky and trappy. So I'll give you my logic for going through this and how I've ended up at the strange conclusion I've ended up at. So Time Hill, if he's still 90% of the horse he was a couple of seasons ago when running in the Stayers Hurdle, he'll win. But he hasn't won over hurdles since 2021. His chasing career was a bit all over the place. His last run was in a slowly run race over hurdles, which didn't really tell us too much about where he is in terms of his hurdling ability these days. Happy to leave him alone at the prices given that. Dashel Drasher tends to improve significantly for his first run. Won first time out last season, but he beat Voix de Rev off levels in a 4-runner race where Langer Dan wasn't trying and Brewing Up a Storm fell at the first. Botox has had a few goes at this level now and disappointed every time. Get the point about him being fresh, but I'm not sure he's up to this grade. He's had plenty of chances to prove it. Garlaw's having a prep run, and I have no idea about the Peter Farley horse, which leads me to Red Risk, who I was actually surprised to see that he's actually had less runs over hurdles than Botox has. That was a bit surprising to me. And if you go on weight-adjusted ratings, they're actually level. So why there's such a big disparity in the price, I'm not quite sure. I think maybe people still have the opinion that Botox has is relatively unexposed. I don't think he is. He's a year younger. That's about it in terms of his comparison to Red Risk. But Red Risk only had one go at 3 miles, and he was struck into that day. You completely forget that run. But his half-brother is a pure 3-miler, and so is his full brother. So you'd think, based on that and his run start over 2.5, that a step up to 3 miles is really going to suit him. He goes well fresh. He's shown that plenty of times in the past, notably last season when he hacked up in a handicap off 136 at Newbury, was then second in the Lanzarote to West Balboa, who then went on to win at Aintree very convincingly, only narrowly denied that day. So that looks like a strong piece of form. He does seem to like a big galloping track. He's got no problem with soft ground. I just thought he was far too big at 14-1 in a race where you can pretty much throw a question mark at everything. Paul Nicholls exuded confidence in his Betfair comments, if I can find them a minute ago. I think he said he has a small each way chance. So maybe not confident on his end, but I think he's always been a hard horse to predict in general. Like, they don't seem to know with him, but his record fresh counts for a lot. He likes soft ground. There's question marks out everything in here. And he's still completely unexposed over 3 miles. And this race often throws up a bit of a shock. So happy to give him a bit of a chance at 14-1.
Yeah, wasn't expecting you to put up Red Risk, I have to say, but you make a very strong case, actually, Dan, despite the possible off-putting comments of his trainer. Jake, what do you make of the race?
Yeah, Paul Nicholls is going to be smashing into the each-way turns at 2 places from 6 runners.
Nice. The shrewd money's down. He's into 12s.
Yeah, no, again, it's not a race I have a massive opinion on. I think Dan's assessment that most horses are pretty fair. Time Hill, I would find it hard to trust him, although admittedly Philip Hobbs is in tremendous form at the minute, so that would be a positive for him. But the one horse that I kind of agree that he comes on for his runs, but I did think that Dashel Drasher he ought to be the type of horse who wins a race like this, because last season, he was second in the Relkeel, he was second in the Cleve, and second in the Stayers Hurdle. Like, connections are going to want to look back on his hurdles career and think, yes, we did a good job with him. When are they going to find an easier Grade 2 opportunity over 3 miles to win than this? Like, I know he may be prepping for the Newbury race. I don't know for sure if that's the plan, but I'd imagine that they'd have him forward enough to be able to at least go close here, because it is just such a weak race. He's got the form in the book that suggests that he's up to winning a race like this. And that's just a slightly bigger price than Time Hill. He'd probably be the one I side with. Again, it's not a race that I'm, rushing to get stuck into at all. But he'd be where I'd be playing if I was having a bet.
Only 6 runners, and we've all gone for different horses. So, make of that what you will. Hopefully one of us is right.
Peter Farhey's horse just wins in.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I can hear that happening and see that happening. Let's move on to the 3 o'clock for Bet365 Charlie Hall Chase. It's the feature of the afternoon, and it's been a home of some very smart horses in the past. It's got a great roll of honour, and Brave Man's Game won the race last year, and he's the odds-on favourite to do just that again. Dan, what do you make of the race generally this year? Just the 4 runners, of course.
Yeah, I think when you look at the entry stage, though, there was never going to be more than 5 or 6. I mean, maybe I Right could have turned up. That's about it, really. Everything else you'd expect is kind of here. Paul Nicholls never going to run Pick Dory and Brave Man's Game. Dashel Drasher, I think, was always more likely to go to the West Yorkshire Hurdle. So this is where we are. Is it a betting heat for me? Absolutely not. I think the Ante-Post bet was generally gentleman's game. A lot seemed to be on him, so they'll be in a decent position if they backed him each way for the 2 places. Like him as a horse, but running against Brave Man's Game on your 3rd start over fence is going to be a big ask. Midnight River's a likeable type, but I think he's going to go for the Coral Gold Cup as his main aim. I think plenty have used this race en route to that, so don't think he's necessarily going to be in the shake-up. Ahoy Senor is more than capable on his day, as we know, but does, again, like Dashel Drasher, tends to come on a lot for that first run of the season. Obviously bombed out in this race last season. So it just kind of brings me back to Brave Man's Game. Like, won this race so comfortably last year. I know you can pick holes in that form realistically with Eldorado and 2nd and Sam Brown 3rd, but did that comfortably enough, took his form to the next level after that. We know the King George is his main aim. He's not going to be 100% geared for this. The ground is going to be softer than ideal. And I think all of those reasons combine as to why I would not be touching it from a betting perspective whatsoever. But I would still be surprised if Brave Man's Game was beaten, although he would be the first repeat winner, I think, since Seymour Business at the turn of the century. So there are enough concerns to make this not a betting proposition for me.
Yeah, I'm going to have it as a race to watch as well. In my opinion, the only jumping performance I've seen that was better than Brave Man's Game's performance in the race last year came from Champagne Fever when he just got touched off by Western Horse in the Arkle. If you watch that race back, he didn't touch a twig at Cheltenham that day. It was the most extraordinary fencing efforts. But Brave Man's Game definitely wasn't far behind in the Charlie Hall last year. It was brilliant to watch. It was, for a jump span like you, Dan, for a jump span like you, Jake, like, it must be so nice to be able to watch a horse chasing that well. Like, it's just refreshing, isn't it? With so many horses, when they go fencing, they have their problems over the large obstacles. Not Brave Man's Game. That's his big plus, isn't it? With that in mind, I think Brave Man's Game will win. So as simple as that, really, for me. In case you hadn't realised, hopefully he can jump as well as he did last year, Jake.
Yeah, exactly. Last year it was billed as a bit of a clash, wasn't it, between Ahoy Senor and Brave Man's Game? And in the end, Ahoy Senor went off, I think it was 11 to 10 favourite. So that said how much the market spoke for him last year. We know now that Brave Man's Game is a much better horse. He's proven that on the track. Obviously, as Dan said, the King George is going to be the aim. But I don't think he'll need to be 100% to win this. I think he'll go in. There's not too much to worry me, to be honest. The fact that, they've chosen to come here rather than wait for the Betfair Chase suggests that Paul Nicholls thinks he's going to win the race, to me. So, Yeah, I'm happy with that. Gentleman's Game, I will echo Dan's thoughts. I really like him as a horse. The beginner's chase he won is obviously working out well. He beat I Am Maximus. Obviously, I Am Maximus has gone on to win over much further than the trip it was that day, but it's still working out as a decent beginner's chase. And then, yeah, his second behind Easy Game the other day was a big performance as well on his return and his second start over fences. So he's a horse I've got a lot of time for. I don't think he'll be good enough to win a race like this. But I'd hope to see him become a good second.
Okay, good stuff. Thanks very much indeed, Jake. Let's go to Ascot then, shall we? And I'll stick with you, Jake, for this one. 205 we're going to talk about first. And the Byrne Group Handicap Chase. This is a really good field, isn't it? Quite difficult to try and weigh this one up.
Yeah, I absolutely love this card at Ascot on Saturday. It's where my focus has been all week. Looking into these races, I think they've had a brilliant declaration. So, yeah, hats off to Ascot. As Dan said at the top of the show, it's probably going to be about heavy. Definitely be heavy in places by the time that we're done with the rain today. So, yeah, we're looking for horses that like the mud, and there's no other horse that likes the mud more than Red Rookie. He's had 3 starts on heavy ground, won them all. And as we mentioned last weekend, he was a horse that myself and Dan both liked for the 2-mile handicap chase at Cheltenham, but we just thought the ground wouldn't be soft enough. And, you know, they kind of gave him every chance of running there, to be honest. They didn't take him out as a non-runner until late in the morning, I think it was, in the end. So they obviously wanted to run him. But I'm glad that they're waiting for this, because this soft ground opportunity at Ascot, it looks absolutely made for him. He's been to Ascot once before and he fell, but he was sent off 2-1 favourite that day to beat Brave Siaska and Amarillo Sky, who's now rated 155. So he was still travelling well at the time when taking a novice tumble. Obviously, he's done a lot of growing up since then. And last season, he won a race at Warwick on soft ground, the only time he got his conditions that he loves. And obviously, as we know, as we've mentioned on this podcast before, Emma Lavelle was in pretty indifferent form last season. It was definitely a quiet one for them. So the fact that he managed to win a race the only time he got the conditions, I think, speaks volumes. He only went up £3 for that, technically now, so he's off a mark of 140, one off 137. I think everything's in his favour here to run a massive race. And yeah, he'd be the one for me. Yeah, I think he's a great bet.
And yeah, Emma Lavelle is stringing a really good nick, aren't they, at the moment? So
exactly,
can absolutely do that. Yeah, really good form. Nice one. Red Rookie for Jake. And Dan, what about you in this really competitive race?
Yep, just copy and paste. Yeah, Red Rookie for me all day in this one. Like he's going to win a big 2-mile handicap or extended 2-mile handicap. It's going to be something like this. Early season, no problem going fresh. Heavy ground, perfect setup really. As you say, Emma Lavelle's got a 33% strike rate since the start of October. Absolutely flying along. I don't need to add too much. I just think he's got his perfect conditions. I don't think he's a horse who's got 10, 15 pounds in hand, but when he's on heavy ground, he is a different proposition to when he's on good ground. So I'd be pretty confident with him as well.
Yeah, I think the ground's going to be a big help for him, isn't it? I quite like the chance of Funambule Civilla, but the ground is the issue with that one. He's more of, I think, potent force on better ground, for all that he has got heavy and soft ground form in the book. I just like the fact he's had this wind operation and he's become quite well handicapped too. And his only start at Ascot in his career was a trouncing of admittedly just one rival in the end. But I think he's still got more to come this year for Venetian Williams and Charlie Deutsch. 8 years old, so should be reaching his prime over fences. And I know he's got a few starts already in his career, but with that wind operation behind him, maybe you can find a little bit more this year. That's the 205. Let's go to the 315 then, the Seat Unique Handicap Hurdle. And our champ was really impressive, I thought, when last season, Freddie and Chris Gordon. Heads the market at the moment, but there's some unexposed types in there, including, of course, Rare Middleton for Bryony Frost and Paul Nicholls after a wind off. Dan, what do you make of this one?
Yeah, interesting race. Obviously, a lot's going to focus on our champ, but obviously very different conditions here to what he's experienced the last couple of times. Obviously gone up a lot in the weights, was very impressive and looks like he could easily win a race again off his revised mark, but the ground would be a concern for me. The one I'm pretty strong on actually is Knickerbocker Glory for the Skelton. So I know we mentioned earlier, aren't necessarily having the best time of things, but I think this is a horse who's going to be absolutely prime for this because it just looks to suit so well. 3 of the past 4 winners of this race made all to do so. That was Gumball, Kid Commando, and Highway 102 last season. That's exactly what Knickerbocker Glory's run style is. He's a precocious front-running type that absolutely loves soft ground. You can put a line through his last run at Aintree. They went a relentless pace that day in the conditional jockeys race. Never had a chance going that kind of pace. But you go back to his second behind Icheo in the Imperial Cup. That was only off £1 lower. Tristan Dole comes on, takes 5 off. So he's got a perfectly good chance at the weights. Obviously, the Imperial Cup tends to be a good race as well. They're keeping him over hurdles despite taking well defenses because they know there's races like this in him. And I think this has got just such a good setup for him. It was interesting that Langadan, it was initially declared and then taken out once they had Campron declared, because I think they were just desperate to make sure he didn't carry too much weight. And he's actually now just got a perfect weight for him. They're going to go from the front. Tristan being on board with Harry up at Weatherby suggests he's their first choice. And I think they've got 3 in the race. I think he's a great each way bet because you know what you're going to get. He's going to go from the front and he should be bang there at the finish.
Okay, Ante-Post glory for Tristan Durrell and Dan Skelton, but Dan overall there. I'm going to nip in before Jake here. I like the chance Tune actually down the bottom of the weights. James Turner's taking off £7. Was really quite impressive, I thought, last time in heavy ground, which is a big plus considering the ground is likely to be the same at Ascot on Saturday. And Nigel Davis, we talk about Emma Lavelle being in great form. Well, he's had a cracking start to the season as well. And I've been quite taken with James Turner in the saddle so far. Doesn't get to claim the £10 like he did last time, but still £7 off, and that nice low weight as well, which in the conditions could be a plus. So chance of tune for me in that, each way around about 10-1. Jake, what do you think?
Yeah, I sent you a message before we started this podcast, Tom, saying that we're in trouble. And that's because last weekend, myself and Dan agreed on a fair amount, and it didn't go so well. But look, we're going to be agreeing again because I'm making an exception to my Dan Skelton rule here and giving Knickerbocker Glory a great chance. Yeah, look, he has conditions perfectly in favour, just like Red Rookie. He goes extremely well fresh. He's only been beaten twice out of 6 tries with a 50-day plus break. He'll love the deep ground. He's 1-2-2 on heavy or 1-1-1-9 on soft. So definitely wants it soft. And he also prefers going right-handed as well. He's 4 from 7 going right-handed. So I think he's got everything in his favour here. As Dan mentioned, put a line for his last run because Paramount took him on for the lead. So they just took each other on and made absolutely frantic pace. You can forget that run. I don't think there's anything in here that's going to go and take him on for the lead. I think there's a few horses that like being ridden prominently, but I think that they'll just track in behind him. And yeah, hopefully he'll be able to go off from the front under Tristan Durrell, taking off 5. I think he's only riding because Harry Skelton's up at Weatherby. Else, Harry Skelton would probably take over even if Weatherby does go off. But yeah, I think he's got a great chance. Altabelli is the other one in here that I did have a bit of a fancy for if he was going to be running well. The problem I have with him is that it looks like they're going to be targeting the Betfair Exchange Trophy with him. That's a course and distance handicap run in December. So perhaps they'll leave a little bit to work with. His mark of 131 is more than acceptable to win a race like this. But yeah, I think they might leave a little bit to work on to have him bang on for next month. So yeah, Knickerbocker Glory for me, and I think he'll have a brilliant chance.
Strong words on Knickerbocker Glory from both Jake and Dan. Let's be hopeful for a big run from that one and from Red Rookie too, because 2 judges in agreement. It can't be 2 weeks in a row when we don't get a successful run of things. It has to change, surely. Good stuff, Jake. The 345 is the last race we're going to look at in detail. That's the Sodexo Gold Cup. Again, likes the Charlie Hall, a really fine roll of honours to this race, and there's some very highly rated chases going to war against each other this year, like Eldorado Allen and Monbeg Genius. And just on Monbeg Genius then, Dan, it's a good place to start because he's one of those horses that before this season, everyone was saying he could be, one of the British hopes to really fly this year. A 7-year-old, another season over fences. Could this be the season in which he really takes off? What do you think of his chance in this and his chance of being a proper chaser this year?
Well, I'm slightly surprised they're running here, to be honest. I was doing the bulk of my analysis last night on the premise that he wouldn't go because I just thought they'd look to the Hennessy. But they've said in the past that he needs soft ground. They know they're going to get it here. And if we're basing off previous renewals of the Coral Gold Cup, it's been good ground quite often, although it's not been as wet as it has been this year. So it's interesting that they come here. And to be honest, now he's in here, I can't really look past him. I think a lot of those in behind are fairly exposed or not quite up to the level. Look, the Monbeg Genius's form doesn't need an introduction. We know the Ultima form is absolutely rock solid. He improved all of last season. John Joe O'Neill actually ran Go Conquer in the Ultima a few years ago, and then he came here to win this race. Our Power last year finished a good position in the Ultima, then came here to win. So it's been a proven route to success. Quite where they see him in the future, I don't know. I think I've read before they think he's more a Grand National type than, say, maybe a Gold Cup, but He's the upwardly mobile one in the race. He's at 10-3. I think that's reasonable enough. Yeah, I think it's hard to get more rock solid than him, I think.
Are we going to agree for the third time here then, Jake? Are you with Monbeg Genius as well?
Yeah, well, for me, he's definitely the bet if we know that he's guaranteed to be trying to win this. So this is a 100 grand race, so I'd imagine that they will be. The only problem I would have slightly is if they are going to, if the vibes are coming out that he is prepping for the Coral Gold Cup or something like that, then that would be the only thing that worries me, because I think off a mark of 147, that would be absolutely perfect for any type of race like this that he wants to go and win. If you go and win a race like this and go up £7 to a mark of like 154, I think it's going to be very hard to win a Coral Gold Cup off of that type of mark. So that would be my only concern. If we hear that, you know, the vibes are really good and that this is his target, then I don't see much getting past him, to be honest. He's by far the best horse in the race, in my opinion. As Dan said, the upwardly mobile one. I think Beauport is another horse who could run well if the vibes were different. Yeah, he got absolutely smashed into 92 joint favourite for the 3 mile Premier Handicap Chase on Grand National Day. I think a lot of people's angles on him that day was that the better ground would probably suit him better than Cheltenham Festival, where he ran the Kinmure on pretty soft ground. So that would be a little bit of concern, but he's definitely capable of his mark of 142 as well. But yeah, as I said, if Monbeg Genius is fully tuned up here, he's going to take the world of beating.
Yeah, I think he will too, to be honest. I think he's the one to be with. The only one I wanted to mention actually against him possibly was Two for Gold. He was last seen winning at Ascot in a similar race to this one, probably not quite as competitive, but he still won well. He's got £4 higher now, which isn't, the worst thing in the world. And he's won fresh in the past, and we know how much he likes Ascot. So I think Two for Gold at 10-1 is actually quite a good each way price. I mean, he might not beat an upwardly mobile horse like Monbeg Genius, but he's certainly got a good chance of getting the 2 and the 3, I would say, for sure. So he'd be I know he's 10 years old and others have got younger legs in them, but yeah, I think he's going to run well in that race, that 345. Moving on to any other business then for the rest of the weekend. I'll go first because there's a couple of races I just wanted to mention. They're not tips, but one of you or both of you might have views on these races. They're both at Ayr. In the 12 o'clock on Saturday is a novices hurdle where we get to see Indy Bar Bleu against Florida Dreams, which could be a proper belting novice hurdle, couldn't it? Florida Dreams obviously win that grade 2 at Aintree, and Indy Bar Bleu, extremely impressive on his bumper debut. And the other one I wanted to just touch on was the 328 at Ayr, which is a novices limited handicap chase with the likes of Chasing Fire and Wrexham. But the one that I wanted to draw your attention to was Marble Sands on chase debut here for Nick Slasser claiming 5 and Graham McPherson. And now with David Kilahina, they are teaming up as a new training partnership. But this is a horse who I always thought would be better over fences. And I think he needs a strong pace to aim at. He's a strong traveller, always sits in behind. But I always thought he'd be better over the last obstacles. Not that he didn't reach a fair level over hurdles, but I'm looking forward to seeing how he gets on over fences. I don't think this is going to be the easiest opportunity for him because he's top weight in a novice's limited handicap. And those who are at a lesser weight than him have already got pretty good form over fences. So I'm not saying he's going to necessarily win this, but I'd be keen on Marble Sands as a chaser for the rest of the season. Hopefully he could put up a decent enough effort to reward your kind of notebook with him. So Marble Sands just to keep an eye on, I think. Nick Slasser's £5 is definitely going to help. Dan, come to you then for the rest of the weekend. I think anything you like?
Yeah, I've still yet to go through everything in detail. I haven't really looked at Ayr yet, just because time constraints. But one I need to flag is in the 1255 at Ascot, and that's Immortal, who was one of the features of the handicap series that's been ticking along pretty nicely. He's extremely well handicapped of 110. I'm almost surprised they're going straight into a handicap, just given I thought Nicky might get a bit more experience into him by running him in a maiden hurdle, but must be of the opinion that this mark is just too good to waste. Soft ground is in his favour. Freddie Gordon in conditional and amateur races is 4 from 11, able to claim 6 here. The concern is that he's already had a second wind up, so he's now had 2 wind ups and 2 runs, which would not be a great sign, but until it proves to be an issue, I'm willing to give him a chance. No prices yet, but he's very well handicapped. And won a massive price if you go back to Wetherby in the 115. Very competitive race, but I'd give 4 de Cerisi an outside chance. Hasn't really happened for him over fences yet, but his first start for Neil Mulholland now. His chase debut actually was a really good bit of form. Like he was behind Bill Baxter and Mucho Mas, obviously runs at Ascot. Those are now £11 higher and £26 higher in the weights respectively, and only gave way after the last that day. That's the only start of offences he's had on heavy ground over 2.5 miles. Those are his conditions. That's what he's going to get here. Plenty of good form in the book previously over hurdles, and even ran in the champion bumper behind Envoy LN. Always had ability. He's very capable of winning off 117 if he can get his jumping together.
Okay, really interesting stuff there, Dan. Thanks for that. Looking forward to seeing Immortal particularly. And what about you, Jake? Any other things or any else things that you like for Saturday?
Yeah, well, as I said,
by the way, English isn't my first language.
No, we can tell.
As I say, my main focus this week has been Ascot. Obviously, there's been a lot of meetings off, so I've just been mainly focusing on that. I like Immortal as well as Dan. I think he'll probably maybe be a bit short for a bet. We'll have to see what the prices come out as. But yeah, he would definitely be one on my list. In the novice handicap chase on the same card over 2 mile free furlong, I think Passing Well is going to have a really good chance. Now, he was a bigger price Ante-Post, but that's because he was double entered. No one really knew where he was going to run. Connection's been waiting for soft ground with him, though. He's been twice a non-run already this season. Once at Cheltenham last weekend and once at the beginning of October as well. They've been waiting for soft ground with him. They finally get that here. 2.5 miles on soft ground, I think, is going to provide the perfect optimum conditions for him. And Jonathan Burke's an interesting booking as well with Gavin Sheehan up at Wetherby. The other one that I had on my list was 10 Links Tom. Now, he was declared for a Lingfield Novice Hurdle today. Unfortunately, that meeting got lost. He was actually put up, I think it's an open price of 6-1, which looked ridiculously big. So I'm hoping that he'll be a decent price again on Saturday because Nicky Henderson sends a point-to-point recruit into the race. So yeah, 10 Links Tom, I think he'll make a successful hurdles debut.
And you won't be surprised to know I agree on Passing Well as well. Shock horror.
Talking of which, please do comment with anything you fancy this weekend. And if you do agree with the two wise men, Jake and Dan, about their fancies, Red Rookie they've agreed on, Monbeg Genius they've agreed on, Knickerbocker Glory as well. Come on, mate.
Wise men? Are you sure?
Oh, for sure. I know. Still got plenty of faith, even after last weekend. You're going to stay sages for a lot longer than just last weekend. I can tell you that for free. Good stuff, guys. Really enjoyable, and looking forward to this weekend too. Some cracking racing.